Do you ever think about those Christmas cartoons from the 1970s? The ones so magical then that it feels unreal you will never see them again? Those cartoons filled living rooms with warmth, color, and excitement families counted on each December. How did something so loved vanish so completely? There was something irresistibly charming about the Raggedy Ann and Andy Christmas Hour, the kind of animated special that looked like it had been stitched together with yarn, fabric, and a dash of pure holiday innocence. Watching it felt like you were peeking into a toy chest brought to life, with characters that moved in that soft, almost wobbly way cartoons had before animation studios discovered sharper outlines and flashier techniques. Raggedy Ann, with her careful stitching and big button eyes, always seemed to know exactly how to bring warmth to even the coldest Christmas storyline. And Andy, ever the loyal companion, tagged along with that signature mix of optimism and clumsy enthusiasm. The special aired only a handful of times, always around dinner hour, when families gathered with plates on their laps and the living room lights dimmed just enough to make the tree sparkle. The story changed slightly each year in people's memories, because the animation had that dreamlike quality that made everything feel softer and brighter than it probably was. And then, almost without warning, the special vanished. Ownership rights shifted, characters changed hands, and the entire hour of animation slipped into a legal maze so complicated that even Santa's elves could not untangle it. All that remains now are hazy memories, a few grainy still frames in old magazines, and the lingering feeling that Christmas once felt a little more hand-stitched. Long before the polished, jingling world of Rankin Bass completely took over holiday animation, there was a curious little off-brand Frosty special that flickered onto screens for a very short window of time. Frosty's Magical Christmas Adventure had the kind of charm that comes from trying your absolute best with whatever budget you have. And trust me, this one did not have much to brag about. Frosty himself looked slightly different from scene to scene, sometimes a bit rounder, sometimes a bit taller, and occasionally with a face that seemed surprised by its own existence. But that unpredictability was part of the fun. Kids did not care if the snowflakes looked more like falling cotton balls or if Frosty's hat tilted at an angle that defied physics. They cared that he talked, he laughed, and he led the children through a holiday adventure filled with snowy hills, twinkling lights, and the kind of magic only the 1970s could get away with. The music leaned heavily on bells, flutes, and whatever instruments the studio had lying around. The backgrounds looked like watercolor paintings that had been left out during a snowstorm. But it worked. It felt cozy, homemade, and sincere. Sadly, when the official Frosty franchise tightened its hold on the character, this little offbeat special disappeared instantly, swallowed up by licensing rights that left no room for unofficial magic. To this day, people swear they remember it, even if nobody can find a surviving tape. The Little Rascals Christmas cartoons were the kind of specials that made kids feel like they were part of a mischievous holiday club. The animation was rough around the edges, as if someone had sketched the characters on notebook paper and breathed life into them at the last second. The gang's Christmas stories usually involved grand plans that spiraled out of control almost immediately. Spanky wanting to fix a crooked tree, Alfalfa trying to serenade carolers without missing a note, Darla attempting to organize a holiday pageant that went sideways the moment Buckwheat showed up with his enthusiastic improvisations. And of course, Pete the Pup wandered through scenes in that calm, unbothered way only a dog can manage. Families would tune in expecting harmless chaos, and always got exactly that. But the humor reflected the era, mixing slapstick antics with character portrayals that modern audiences would not find so charming anymore. Licensing for the Little Rascals was already a web of complications, with ownership of specific characters jumping from studio to studio over the decades. Add in outdated depictions and jokes that have not aged particularly well, and the cartoons quietly slipped into the vault. They were never remastered, never reissued, and barely mentioned in rerun blocks afterward. Still, for many who watched them on snowy December mornings, these scrappy, heartfelt, chaotic cartoons hold a sentimental place impossible to forget. There was something wonderfully surreal about stumbling across the animated Nutcracker on Saturday morning, especially when most kids tuned in expecting superheroes, slapstick animals, and cereal mascots shouting about sugar. Instead, you got ballerinas gliding across hand-painted backdrops, soldiers marching with dramatic orchestral thumps, and dream sequences that floated along in soft pastel colors. It was not fancy animation by any means, but it had an earnest charm that pulled you in whether you understood the story or not. The characters would twirl and leap with movements that seemed slightly too ambitious for the animators, resulting in poses that held for half a second longer than intended. But instead of feeling awkward, it somehow added to the dreamlike quality of the whole production. The music, recorded in a slightly echoing studio, carried the familiar melodies that adults recognized instantly and children absorbed without even knowing the name, Tchaikovsky. The special aired only a few seasons before networks shifted toward higher energy programming, and bigger budget Nutcracker adaptations stole the spotlight. With no reruns, no home release, and no surviving press materials outside a few grainy photos, this delicate little version faded into the shadows. Ask anyone who remembers it, and they will tell you the same thing. It was strange, lovely, unexpected, and absolutely unforgettable. Before the polished, heartwarming Berenstain Bears specials of later decades, there was a humble little first attempt at bringing Bear Country to animated life. The Berenstain Bears' first holiday animation had all the charm of a storybook being translated into motion with crayons, patience, and maybe a few cups of hot cocoa. The lines were thick, the colors slightly muted, and the characters moved with that slow, deliberate pace that made it feel like someone was turning the pages for you. Mama Bear offered gentle advice that sometimes echoed a little too loudly through the mono audio. Papa Bear, in all his enthusiastic clumsiness, tried to hang decorations and inevitably made a mess of the living room. Sister and Brother Bear scampered around in winter scarves that never seemed to stay in one place. Kids watching did not care that the animation stuttered or that the snow looked more like confetti drifting lazily downward. They cared that the bears felt like a family they already knew from bedtime stories. But when more polished versions arrived in later years, this original disappeared almost instantly. Licensing deals changed. Newer productions overshadowed the old one, and the first holiday animation slipped into the shadows of forgotten archives. It exists now mostly in memories, whispered about by fans who swear they saw a simpler, softer Bear Country once upon a Christmas time. There was a brief moment in the 1970s when someone decided the live-action holiday film, The Christmas That Almost Was Not, deserved an animated remake, and so it was born. The animated edition had a quirky, bouncy energy, as if everyone involved was trying to squeeze every last drop of whimsy out of the original story. The characters were redesigned with rounder faces, bigger eyes, and more dramatic gestures that occasionally drifted into unintentional comedy. The villain looked slightly less menacing and slightly more confused, and Santa Claus had a habit of nodding his head in a looping animation that made him appear unusually agreeable. The songs, reimagined for animation, were catchy in that delightful but slightly off-key way only 70s soundtracks could achieve. Although the special aired a few times during holiday marathons, it never found the same loyal audience as its live-action predecessor over time. The master tapes were shuffled from one storage space to another, caught in a cycle of network changes and distribution reshuffling. Eventually, the animated remake slipped out of circulation entirely. People who watched it as children describe it with the kind of fond uncertainty usually reserved for dreams, vivid in feeling, fuzzy in detail, and oddly comforting. Yet, finding proof of its existence is almost impossible now. It is one of those specials that lived briefly, brightly, and then drifted quietly into television folklore. The Magic Toy Shop Christmas Mystery felt like watching someone animate the inside of an old-fashioned toy store that only opened once every December. The special began with a gentle snowfall, a creaky sign swinging outside, and a narrator whose voice sounded like they had read thousands of bedtime stories. Inside the toy shop, wooden soldiers marched in uneven rhythm, dolls blinked slowly with painted-on eyelashes, and Jack in the Boxes popped up with a timing that seemed suspiciously unpredictable. The mystery at the heart of the special was charmingly simple. Something inside the shop kept moving out of place overnight, and the toys needed to solve the puzzle before Christmas morning. Kids loved the sense of adventure, even if the animation occasionally froze for a second while the background caught up. The colors were warm, the music twinkled like old music box chimes, and the whole thing felt like it was sewn together with imagination instead of technology. Unfortunately, being a syndicated special meant it changed hands often. Copies were poorly stored, some recordings were taped over, and the master reels were never properly archived. As a result, the entire special vanished from circulation. Only a handful of people remember the exact plot, but everyone who watched it remembers the feeling: cozy, mysterious, and wonderfully handmade. Before Strawberry Shortcake became the polished pastel icon of the 1980s, she appeared in a simpler, rougher, and far more experimental first winter special. The original Strawberry Shortcake winter special had a grainy look that made every scene feel like a frosted cookie left too long in the cold. Strawberry herself had a slightly oversized bonnet, cheeks a shade too rosy, and a voice that sounded like it had been recorded inside a real mixing bowl. Her friends drifted through scenes with the kind of stiff movements that made it clear animators were doing their best with limited resources, but none of that mattered to kids. The world of Strawberry Land looked magical, covered in sparkling snow that shimmered like sugar sprinkled across construction paper. The plot usually involved saving a friend, fixing a winter mishap, or bringing warmth back to a chilly corner of their world. Shortly after airing, however, character licensing moved to a new corporate home, and the early version became tied up in pre-American greetings agreements. That paperwork turned the special into a ghost. It has never been reissued, remastered, or officially acknowledged. Fans who remember it describe it with wide-eyed nostalgia, certain it existed even if modern archives pretend otherwise. Yogi Bear's Lost Christmas Caper was one of those blink-and-you-miss-it specials that aired in only a few regions and at odd hours, usually sandwiched between local commercials and late-afternoon reruns. It featured Yogi at his most optimistic, wandering through a snow-covered Jellystone park with Boo Boo at his side, both of them determined to help Santa with a sudden holiday emergency. The animation had that classic Hanna-Barbera bounce, where characters slid across the screen instead of walking, and mouths flapped enthusiastically without always matching the words. Kids loved it anyway. Yogi tried to deliver presents, borrowed a sleigh that definitely did not belong to him, and got chased by a series of increasingly frustrated park rangers. Boo Boo, ever patient, offered gentle advice that Yogi ignored every single time. Families watched it once or twice before it vanished. Because it was a regional broadcast, no major studio stored the master reel, and reruns depended on whichever local station happened to have a usable copy. By the 1990s, most of those copies were gone. People still argue about the exact plot, but everyone agrees on one thing: Yogi dressed in winter gear stumbling through the snow is a memory too delightful to lose completely. The Brady Kids Christmas cartoon captured that unmistakable 70s blend of sunshine, polyester, and cheerful chaos, except this time, wrapped in holiday ribbons and snowflakes. The Brady Kids, already known for their groovy animated spin-off, found themselves thrown into a Christmas adventure filled with bright colors, winking stars, and guest appearances from talking animals that had no logical connection to the Brady universe. The animation had that charming stiffness of the era, where characters struck dramatic poses and held them just long enough for you to notice Marcia tried to organize the perfect holiday celebration. Greg attempted to play cool while juggling way too many tasks, and Bobby and Cindy got themselves into the kind of trouble only Saturday morning cartoons could justify. The whole special flowed with catchy background tracks that sounded like someone ran holiday jingles through a psychedelic filter. Kids adored it because it felt familiar and festive all at once, but licensing for the Brady Bunch franchise became tangled in a web of ownership changes, syndication deals, and shifting copyrights. The Christmas cartoon, being part of the animated spin-off rather than the main show, ended up slipping through the cracks. Today, it survives mostly in the memories of those who caught it at the right moment, glowing softly in that perfect mix of nostalgia and, wait, did that really exist? The Partridge Family Christmas cartoon episode was the kind of 70s holiday special that felt like someone took the spirit of the show added twice as many sparkles, and then animated the whole thing with the brightest crayons in the studio. The Partridge Kids, complete with perfectly feathered hair, even in cartoon form, piled into their Technicolor tour bus for a holiday adventure that made very little sense and yet somehow felt exactly right. Every scene swayed to upbeat music that sounded like Christmas carols, sped up just enough to keep the energy high. Lori tried to keep everyone organized. Danny took charge of situations he definitely should not have been in charge of, and little Tracy occasionally wandered off to talk to friendly animals that appeared without explanation. It was cheerful, chaotic, and genuinely fun, but the animated spin-off never had a stable home in syndication, and the Christmas episodes suffered most. Licensing bounced between companies, reruns were limited, and eventually the holiday special vanished entirely. Fans remember it the way people remember dreams: colorful, warm, and slightly confusing, but full of 70s charm. Deputy Dog's Christmas Snowstorm arrived on television with that laid-back Southern humor the character was known for, wrapped in a blanket of winter mischief. The animation was simple, the jokes were cozy, and the characters moved with the slow, gentle pacing of a holiday morning when nobody is in a rush to do anything. The plot usually involved a snowstorm blowing through the swamp, sending Deputy Dog scrambling to keep holiday decorations from drifting away and trying to prevent his friends from creating even bigger messes. Kids loved the gentle humor, the warm voices, and the way the snowfall looked like tiny cotton flakes drifting across the screen. But as decades passed, broadcasting rights grew tangled, and some of the humor was deemed too outdated to air again. Reruns vanished. Home releases never materialized, and the special slipped quietly into obscurity. Today, only those who caught it during a lucky afternoon rerun remember its soft charm and slow-moving magic. Christmas with the Groovy Ghoulies was unlike any holiday cartoon before or since. Imagine a group of cheerful monsters celebrating Christmas as if they were hosting a rock concert inside a haunted house decorated with twinkling lights and plastic snow. The Ghoulies sang, danced, cracked jokes, and somehow made the spooky season work perfectly with the festive one. Kids adored the bright colors and silly humor, while adults enjoyed the surprisingly catchy songs. It was chaotic, lively, and exactly what 70s animation did best: embrace the weird and make it fun. But the special relied heavily on music owned by multiple companies, and when those rights expired, the whole production was yanked from circulation. Attempts to reissue it ran into legal snarls that turned the special into television folklore. Today, it survives mostly as a nostalgic whisper among fans who remember the joy of watching monsters celebrate Christmas like the world's friendliest house band. The Gumby Christmas Claytime special felt like someone crafted the entire holiday out of green clay, warm lighting, and pure imagination. Gumby and Pokey wandered through a snowy clay landscape where every footprint looked freshly pressed, every tree shimmered with hand-sculpted care, and every character had that gentle wobble unique to claymation of the era. The story was simple and heartfelt, often involving someone needing help, something going missing, or a small Christmas miracle tucked into a pocket of the clay world. Kids watched in awe as each scene seemed to breathe in slow, careful motions. But claymation was fragile. The materials aged quickly, and the original master suffered damage that made restoration nearly impossible. With no reruns and no reissued copies, the special faded from public memory. People who saw it still recall the soft glow of its world, the way Gumby stretched when he hugged someone, and the peaceful snow that looked like it might melt if you touched the screen. In the 1970s, educational dinosaur cartoons were all the rage. So naturally, someone decided dinosaurs should help Santa save Christmas. The Christmas Dinosaurs Save Santa was a bright, prehistoric adventure filled with cheerful brontosauruses, chatty pterodactyls, and a T-Rex with a surprisingly gentle heart. The dinosaurs teamed up to clear snowy paths, carry giant toy sacks, and guide Santa's sleigh when his reindeer caught a seasonal cold. Kids loved seeing their favorite ancient creatures wrapped in scarves and singing holiday songs. The animation had that charming, slightly clunky look where every movement felt like a proud effort. But as interest in educational dinosaur cartoons faded near the end of the decade, The special lost its audience and its funding network stopped airing it. Studios shuffled content, and soon the Christmas dinosaurs marched quietly into extinction once again. Today, it is remembered mostly through nostalgic descriptions and the faint memory of a T-Rex wearing earmuffs. The Wacky Races Christmas Rally took the show's chaotic energy and wrapped it tightly in tinsel, snowdrifts, and competitive holiday spirit. All the racers returned, each determined to win the North Pole Cup while navigating snowy roads, slippery ice patches, and the occasional mischievous elf causing mayhem. At one point, the racers skidded so wildly that even the animators seemed surprised by where the vehicles landed. The whole race felt like someone handed holiday decorations to a pack of toddlers and said, "Make it festive," then animated the results. There was a frantic charm to every scene, the kind that made you lean forward without realizing it. Dick dastardly plotted elaborate holiday-themed traps, and Muttley giggled with delight every time a snowman exploded in just the wrong place. Kids watched with wide eyes as the cars skidded, spun, and rocketed across landscapes painted in bright winter colors. It was festive, silly, and perfectly tuned to the Saturday morning vibe, but the special featured characters owned by several different rights holders, and once the contracts expired, the whole holiday rally fell into legal limbo. Attempts to re-air it were blocked by overlapping claims, leaving fans with only fleeting memories and a few blurry promotional images. Josie and the Pussycats. Holiday Road Trip sent the band on a snowy cross-country musical adventure filled with bright costumes, catchy jingles, and plenty of cartoon hijinks. The group traveled from town to town, playing cheerful holiday concerts and solving small mysteries along the way. There was a scene where the band performed on a moving sleigh that somehow stayed perfectly in tune despite the wind blasting past their faces. The animators took full advantage of the era's love for bold color palettes, turning every moment into a postcard of 70s style. Even the snow looked groovy, sparkling in shades no real winter has ever produced. Melody cracked jokes, Valerie saved the day with clever ideas, and Josie kept everyone moving forward despite holiday chaos following them like confetti in the wind. The animation style leaned into bold colors and expressive poses that made even simple scenes feel dramatic. Kids loved the blend of music and adventure, while adults enjoyed the upbeat retro soundtrack. But when the show's overseas distribution deals expired, reruns quietly disappeared. The holiday episode slipped into that strange void where content exists only in the memories of those who watched it at the perfect moment. Fans still hum its long-lost songs even though no recordings remain. The Christmas Trolls of Timber Hollow was a woodland fantasy special that looked like it had been animated with crayons, moss, and the softest winter sunlight. The trolls were more whimsical than frightening, with big noses, fluffy hair, and oversized mittens that made everything they touched seem gentler. There was a sequence involving glowing berry lanterns that felt so enchanting people still describe it decades later. The trolls danced in circles around a fire that did not burn but shimmered like painted light, a touch only 70s animators could pull off. Even their shadows seemed to move with personality, stretching and curling like characters of their own. The story followed their efforts to protect Timber Hollow from an unexpected winter disaster while preparing for their once-a-year holiday feast. Kids loved watching the trolls tumble through snow, gather glowing berries, and sing harmonies that sounded like lullabies mixed with wind chimes. But as animation standards changed, the troll designs were labeled outdated, and concerns grew about how certain features might be interpreted by modern audiences. The special was quietly shelved, never remastered, and rarely mentioned again. Still, those who saw it remember the cozy glow of its forest and the trolls' joyful determination to save their holiday. The Great North Pole Talent Show was a musical spectacle that played out like a holiday variety hour hosted by elves who had never rehearsed anything in their lives. Reindeer performed tap routines, snowmen attempted comedy acts that melted halfway through, and penguins delivered songs with so much enthusiasm that the audio sometimes distorted. One unforgettable act involved a gingerbread quartet that crumbled apart mid-song, yet somehow finished their performance. Another featured an elf magician whose trick succeeded only because the animation occasionally skipped a frame at the right moment. Kids watched in awe, not because the acts were polished, but because anything could happen on that tiny Frosty stage. Kids loved the playful chaos, and adults chuckled at the goofy charm of it all. The background shimmered with glittery blues and whites, giving the whole special a frosty glow. But the show relied heavily on a soundtrack packed with original songs, and the music licensing fees ballooned over the decades. Networks refused to pay the renewal costs, and the special was withdrawn from circulation entirely. Today, people who remember it recall the laughter, the wobbly stage performances, and the feeling that anything could happen during that talent show in the snow. Holiday hijinks with Huckleberry Hound brought the beloved blue dog into a chilly wonderland where everything that could go wrong during Christmas usually did. Huckleberry tried decorating trees that fell over, sang carols slightly off-key, and attempted to help Santa in ways that created more trouble than assistance. One gag involved Huckleberry wrapping himself completely inside a string of lights, blinking in perfect rhythm with the background music. Another saw him trying to shovel snow, only for the animation to loop so oddly that he never seemed to make progress. Yet kids roared with laughter because the mistakes felt intentional, like part of Huckleberry's holiday charm. The humor was light, the pacing slow and cozy, and the animation filled with that unmistakable Hanna-Barbera bounce. Kids adored the gentle silliness, and adults appreciated the familiar voice and easygoing charm. But as years passed, certain jokes and cultural references were deemed too outdated for reruns. Rights complications added another barrier, and the holiday short slipped quietly into retirement. Today, it lives mostly in the warm nostalgia of viewers who can still hear Huckleberry's drawl drifting through snowy holiday scenes. The Misfit Robots Save Christmas was one of those specials that felt like it came straight out of a toy aisle where imagination mattered more than logic. The robots clanked around with stiff movements, blinking lights, and cheerful beeps that probably came from whatever sound effects machine the studio could find. Their mission was simple: help Santa when his workshop gears jammed, his sleigh lights flickered, or his conveyor belts froze from winter mischief. Kids loved the idea of toys saving Christmas, especially toys with mismatched parts and big hearts. But the entire special was sponsored by a toy company that eventually went out of business, taking all the broadcast rights with it. When the company folded, no one stepped in to preserve the cartoon, and it quietly disappeared. Today, people who remember it swear the robots had personalities as bright as their blinking chests, even if the animation wobbled. Santa and the Space Explorers was a bold attempt to mix two things children adored in the 1970s: holiday cheer and outer space adventures. Santa teamed up with a group of young astronauts who traveled through glittery galaxies on a mission to deliver gifts to planets waiting for a visit from the North Pole. The animation sparkled with star fields, cosmic swirls, and future-themed sleigh upgrades that looked like they were taped together with Christmas hope. Kids loved how Santa floated in zero gravity, with his beard drifting like a slow comet. But when television networks later phased out space-themed holiday content, the special vanished from schedules. No reruns, no re-releases, just the faint memory of Santa riding through space with explorers who believed Christmas could reach the stars. The Littlest Elf's snowy journey was one of the softest, sweetest Christmas specials ever aired. The animation had that watercolor look that made every snowy hill seem hand-brushed, every little detail glowing with winter softness. The story followed a tiny elf determined to deliver one lost present before sunrise, wandering through forests, icy ponds, and shimmering nighttime landscapes. The narration was gentle, the music warm, and the pacing slow enough to feel like a bedtime story told by firelight. But it aired only once or twice in select regions, never released on tape, and the master copy was never preserved. As a result, no broadcast-quality version survives. Fans can describe scenes vividly, but no one can prove it existed except through childhood memories. The Christmas blizzard of Bongo the Bear was a regional treasure, the kind of holiday special only a handful of families ever got to see. Bongo lived in a snowy forest that looked like it had been painted on frosted glass, and his gentle personality carried the story as he tried to protect his woodland friends from a blizzard that arrived just before Christmas Eve. Kids loved the friendly animals, simple jokes, and the warm tone that felt like someone reading aloud from a beloved picture book. But because the cartoon aired on a small regional station, it never reached nationwide syndication. Tapes were reused or misplaced, and local copies did not survive. Today, only those within that broadcast area remember Bongo's brave, cozy adventure. The Carefree Christmas Circus special was exactly what it sounded like. A holiday celebration bursting with acrobats, jugglers, tightrope walkers, and a ringmaster who narrated the story with dramatic flair. The animation bounced with bright colors and swirling spotlights, making the whole special feel like a miniature circus tent filled with winter magic. Kids watched wide-eyed as performers flipped, spun, and juggled ornaments high above the ring. But in later years, shifting views on animal welfare and circus-themed content caused studios to retire the special entirely. It has not aired in decades, leaving behind only the warm memory of a circus that celebrated Christmas with fearless joy. In the early 90s, Tiny Toon Adventures was the crown jewel of cartoon comedy, a fast, witty blend of Looney Tunes energy and self-aware humor. When they took on It's a Wonderful Life in their Christmas special, the result was both hilarious and surprisingly poignant. Buster Bunny, feeling forgotten and unappreciated, wishes he had never existed. And of course, chaos follows. The story turned meta in true Tiny Toon fashion, filled with slapstick jokes, heartfelt moments, and nods to classic holiday films. Even through the madness, the show managed to speak to every kid who had ever felt invisible during the holidays. It reminded them that laughter and purpose often come from being seen, even by one person who cares. Yet beneath the cartoon antics, there was a genuine emotional pulse. The special celebrated friendship, purpose, and the importance of small acts of kindness, all through the lens of zany animation. The pacing was lightning fast, but the message lingered. It reminded kids, and maybe even adults, that the world is brighter because we are in it, even when we cannot see it ourselves. It was pure 90s magic, loud, colorful, clever, and unafraid to get a little sentimental when it mattered most. Head of the Class took the classic high school sitcom and turned it upside down. Instead of focusing on detention-bound delinquents, it followed a group of overachieving geniuses in an honors program, kids who could quote Shakespeare but struggled with everyday life. Their teacher, Charlie Moore, played by Howard Hesseman, wasn't the strict academic type. He was a free spirit who used humor and life lessons instead of test prep to get through to his students. The result was a show that mixed intellectual jokes with the kind of heart only an 80s sitcom could deliver. Each episode balanced clever dialogue with relatable teenage emotions, crushes, insecurities, and the pressure to succeed. The kids were nerdy, eccentric, and lovable, creating a dynamic that felt fresh and honest. It celebrated intelligence without ever being smug, showing that being smart didn't mean having it all figured out. Head of the Class became a quiet inspiration for students watching at home, proving that learning could be funny and teachers could be heroes in denim jackets. It made being different cool long before that became mainstream. You knew a kid was cool if their necklace made noise from down the hallway. Enter the plastic charm necklace. These things were a fashion statement and a choking hazard all rolled into one. A long, brightly colored chain that you decked out with dozens of plastic trinkets. Mini roller skates, tiny telephones, hair dryers, soda bottles, and anything else the size of your thumb. The more charms, the better. It was like curating your own loud, clunky resume of childhood interests. Everyone traded them. Everyone bragged about having the rare ones. And of course, the plastic was cheap enough to snap if you breathed on it wrong. Teachers hated them. Parents hated stepping on them. But kids loved how collectible they felt. That is, until the day you leaned over your desk and your entire charm empire dumped itself on the floor like a sad little toy avalanche. Still, for a while, they were the perfect combination of fashion and fun. And speaking of things that looked fun but failed to function properly, Do you remember the sweet-smelling school supply that never actually worked? Let us talk about rubber-scented erasers shaped like food. If you grew up in the 80s, chances are you remember the wild mix of action and holiday cheer that came from the He-Man and She-Ra Christmas special. This was no ordinary festive cartoon. It was a cosmic explosion of lasers, moral lessons, and sincerity. The story followed two children from Earth who accidentally land on Eternia, where He-Man, She-Ra, and the villains of Snake Mountain all learn what Christmas really means. For a series built on power swords and villains shouting about domination, the holiday message landed surprisingly well. The animation was colorful, the music heroic, and the tone unapologetically grand. Even Skeletor, one of television's most iconic villains, ends up showing a rare moment of kindness, a small but unforgettable gesture that defined the heart of the special. Like many shows from that decade, it balanced toy marketing with real warmth and somehow made it work. It was everything 1980s children's television did best: loud, imaginative, and full of heart. Looking back now, it is almost impossible not to smile at the earnestness of it all. In a world of irony, He-Man and She-Ra's Christmas feels like pure sincerity, something television has not made in a long time. Corgi toys were more than just cars. They were miniature masterpieces. Introduced by British company Metoy in the late 1950s, they reached peak popularity in the 1960s with American kids who were obsessed with anything fast, shiny, or connected to TV and movie heroes. These die-cast vehicles were small enough to fit in your pocket, but detailed enough to spark hours of imaginative play. Police cars came with real-looking sirens. Race cars had working hoods. And the crown jewel? The James Bond Aston Martin DB5, complete with ejector seat, pop-out machine guns, and a hidden bulletproof shield. For kids growing up in the 1960s, it was the coolest thing you could own. Movie magic shrunk down and placed in your palm. Corgi cars raced across kitchen floors, crashed down backyard driveways, and survived countless shoebox battles. They felt heavier than Hot Wheels, sturdier than Matchbox, and somehow more real. Over time, most got scratched, dented, or lost. But finding one today, even chipped, brings back the joy of flipping it over to read the brand stamp and revving it across a table edge. They were not just toys. They were little slices of the world, only faster. The Care Bears took on one of the most ambitious projects of their time with the Nutcracker suite, transforming Tchaikovsky's ballet into a bright, candy-colored adventure. It was bold, imaginative, and a little surreal, a perfect match for the gentle optimism of the Care Bears universe. The story followed Cheer Bear and friends as they helped a girl named Anna defeat the evil vizier and rescue the Nutcracker prince. It was more than a retelling. It was a message about courage, kindness, and believing in yourself, even when the odds seemed impossible. The animation shimmered with soft pastels, dreamlike sequences, and Christmas sparkle. The music borrowed from the original ballet but reimagined it through Saturday morning simplicity, turning classical grandeur into childlike wonder. Like many specials from the 1980s, it was part fantasy, part moral lesson, and completely sincere. Watching it today, you can feel the nostalgia in every frame. It was a time when Saturday mornings promised magic, when the Care Bears' message of love was enough to make a world feel safe. And in a decade filled with cynicism and consumerism, this gentle story about heart and hope stood quietly apart. When Webster first aired, it instantly drew comparisons to Diff'rent Strokes, another show about a young boy finding family in an unexpected place. But it quickly proved it had its own unique magic. Emmanuel Lewis played Webster Long, a tiny, big-hearted orphan adopted by a former football player, and his wife, played by Alex Karras and Susan Clark. What started as a simple premise blossomed into one of the most heartfelt comedies of the 1980s. Lewis's charm carried the show. His expressions, quick wit, and natural warmth made Webster impossible not to love. The series balanced humor and sentiment perfectly, capturing the ups and downs of family life without becoming overly sweet. Episodes often dealt with serious issues, loneliness, loss, and growing pains, but always found the light within them. The chemistry between the cast felt genuine, like a real family figuring things out together. Webster's innocence and optimism became a symbol of hope in a decade obsessed with bigger, louder entertainment. He reminded viewers that family wasn't about perfection. It was about love, laughter, and showing up for each other. The show's legacy endures because it dared to mix real emotion with sitcom simplicity. In a time filled with outlandish comedies, Webster stood out for keeping things sincere. It made us laugh, tear up, and remember that kindness never goes out of style. Before padded gym floors and TikTok dance tutorials, there was the breakdancing board. It was exactly what it sounds like. A portable, foldable square of cardboard with a brick wall graphic or checkerboard print meant to simulate the streets. Because nothing says urban grit like unfolding a fake alleyway in your suburban driveway. These things were lightweight, glossy, and slid around on every surface. In theory, they let you spin, pop, and lock without bruising your spine on concrete. In reality, they slid out from under you mid-move, causing more scraped elbows than applause. But in the moment, they felt cool. They turned any parking lot into a stage. Throw on some Run DMC, slap that cardboard down, and suddenly you were in it. Never mind that it bent after 2 uses and warped in the rain. You were performing. You were part of something. Until the corner curled up or the board tore in half while trying to nail a backspin. But that was the 80s. Function took a backseat to flair. And speaking of flair, our next trend lets you turn every sweatshirt into a personal fashion statement or a wearable art disaster. When Yogi Bear escaped from Jellystone Park that Christmas, he was not looking for trouble, just a good holiday meal. What followed became one of the most cheerful crossover specials of the early 1980s. Yogi Bear's all-star comedy Christmas capper gathered nearly every Hanna-Barbera character for a wild, heartwarming holiday adventure. Yogi, Boo Boo, Huckleberry Hound, Quick Draw McGraw, and even Fred Flintstone came together to help a lonely little girl who ran away from home. It was a rare moment when a studio brought all its animated icons into one big story, something that today would be almost impossible. The animation sparkled with the bright, festive colors of early 80s television, and the humor was as cozy as the firelight that flickered across the screen. The special blended slapstick comedy with real sentiment, proving that laughter and kindness could share the same stage. Yogi may have been smarter than the average bear, but this time, he was also a symbol of generosity. It captured the purest essence of holiday cartoons, chaotic, charming, and full of heart. If the 1980s loved anything, it was big families and bigger laughs, and just the 10 of us delivered both. A spin-off of Growing Pains, the show followed Coach Graham Lubbock, his patient wife Elizabeth, and their 8 children as they navigated life, love, and laundry in one hilariously overcrowded household. The humor was as chaotic as the family itself. Kids shouting over each other, teenage drama exploding daily, and a father just trying to keep his sanity intact. But beneath the madness was genuine warmth. The Lubbocks weren't perfect, but they were full of heart. Each child had a distinct personality, creating a colorful mix of relatable family moments and slapstick fun. The show managed to balance wholesome values with the quick wit that defined the decade's best comedies. It wasn't about perfection, it was about perseverance, with a punchline. Just the 10 of us captured what it meant to find joy in the chaos, reminding viewers that no matter how noisy life got, family always came first, even if you had to shout to be heard. Fashion layering experiments in the 1980s were less about logic and more about volume. You started with a base, maybe a turtleneck. Then you added a sweater, then a vest, maybe a blazer on top. Why? Because more was more. Scarves were optional, belts were mandatory. Jewelry? Yes, all of it. You wore 2 pairs of socks, scrunched perfectly over leggings tucked into boots. Hats inside? No problem. Fingerless gloves with bangles? Absolutely. It did not have to match. In fact, it was cooler if it did not. You looked like a walking closet explosion, and you owned it. The goal was not subtlety. The goal was layers. Warmth was a bonus, but style came first. Some outfits weighed more than a small dog. Some made it impossible to bend your arms. But in the mirror, you saw confidence. You saw edge. You saw someone ready to make an entrance, even if it was just down the school hallway. Looking back, the combinations were questionable, but the spirit behind them? Pure creativity. Fashion in the 1980s did not whisper. It shouted, boldly, loudly, and with 7 visible layers. Rankin and Bass were already legends in Christmas animation, but The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus might be their most ambitious and overlooked masterpiece. Adapted from L. Frank Baum's novel, this special reimagined Santa not as a jolly old man, but as a mythic hero raised by forest spirits and immortals. The animation was a mix of stop-motion artistry and fantasy grandeur, blending warmth with mystery. It felt different from their earlier works like Rudolph or Frosty, darker, more mystical, and deeply emotional. The story showed Santa's entire journey, from a lost child to a symbol of giving, battling despair, and even death along the way. It was about why generosity matters, and how even one person's kindness can become eternal. The puppets were beautifully crafted, the narration solemn yet comforting, and the music hauntingly beautiful. It was one of those specials that children watched in awe without fully understanding, only to grow up and realize just how profound it really was. This was Rankin and Bass closing an era of handmade magic, an era that, once gone, could never truly return. When Gimme a Break hit television, Nell Carter brought an energy that instantly stole the spotlight. She played Nell Harper, a tough but loving housekeeper who stepped in to help a widowed police chief raise his 3 daughters. What could have easily been a standard sitcom about domestic life turned into something so much more because of Carter's powerhouse personality. Her sharp wit, quick timing, and soulful voice made every episode sing, sometimes literally. The humor came naturally, but what made the show special was its heart. Nell wasn't just cleaning a house, she was holding a family together. The daughters brought their own teenage chaos, while the father tried to maintain control, and Nell balanced it all with sass and compassion. The show tackled serious topics, from grief to growing up, without ever losing its warmth or laughter. Carter's performance was magnetic, giving the show both comedy and soul. Gimme a Break captured the spirit of the 1980s by blending sharp humor with genuine emotion, proving that family didn't have to be perfect to be strong. Every wisecrack and heartfelt moment reminded viewers that love could make even the most chaotic household feel like home. Record players were more than machines. They were furniture, ritual, and mood setters all in one. In the 1960s, every home had one, whether it stood alone on a tabletop or was built into a cabinet the size of a small sofa. You lifted the lid, selected a vinyl record, and gently placed it on the turntable. Then came the careful lowering of the needle, a tiny, deliberate act that brought a whole room to life. The crackle before the music started was half the experience. Whether it was the Beatles, Patsy Cline, or the Four Tops, the sound filled the air in a way no radio could match. You listened to full albums, start to finish. You memorized the order of songs. You stared at the cover art like it held secrets. Records were delicate, and so was the act of playing them. Dust had to be brushed off. Needles had to be replaced. Some turntables had automatic arms, others had to be nudged by hand. Either way, it felt like ceremony. The music had weight, not just in sound, but in the effort it took to hear it. Families gathered for listening nights. Teenagers escaped into headphones. A stack of records leaning against the wall told you everything about someone. And even when the music skipped, it felt like part of the charm. That moment when the room fell still, waiting for the needle to find its groove again, it was quiet, real, and unforgettable. Today, vinyl has made a comeback, but for those who grew up spinning hits in the 1960s, it never really left. Few shows in television history balanced humor and humanity quite like Diff'rent Strokes. The story followed Arnold and Willis Jackson, 2 brothers from Harlem adopted by a wealthy widower, Mr. Drummond. Their move into a Park Avenue penthouse created endless culture clashes and comic misunderstandings. Gary Coleman as Arnold became a phenomenon. His expressive face, quick wit, and the now legendary catchphrase, "What you talking about, Willis?" turned him into one of the decade's most beloved stars. But underneath the laughs, the show addressed deeper themes: race, class, and belonging, with surprising grace. It was funny, yes, but also warm and grounded in compassion. Audiences connected to the genuine affection between the characters, which made every heartfelt moment land even harder. Diff'rent Strokes became more than a sitcom. It was a message about family, understanding, and finding common ground in a divided world. Long after it ended, Arnold's grin and that unforgettable catchphrase still echo through pop culture as reminders of the laughter that brought people together. Roller rink socials were where friendships formed, crushes blossomed, and fashion collided with fluorescent lighting. Every weekend, kids flocked to the local rink like it was the hottest club in town. You laced up rental skates that never quite fit, wobbled onto the floor, and tried not to fall in front of your classmates. The music blared, everything from Madonna to Michael Jackson, and the lights spun in pinks, blues, and greens. Couples held hands during the slow skate. Kids showed off their best moves during the speed rounds. And when you got tired, you grabbed a slice of cardboard-flavored pizza or a snow cone that turned your tongue electric blue. The carpet was hideous, the lockers never worked, but the vibe? Unbeatable. Roller rinks were more than entertainment. They were a rite of passage. You had your first dance there, your first bruise, maybe even your first kiss, awkward and giggly behind the concession stand. Parents watched from the sidelines or dropped you off with a reminder to call from the payphone. The rink was loud, sticky, and chaotic, and yet it was magic. Even now, the smell of rental skates and popcorn grease brings it all back in one wheeled rush. If there is one Christmas special that could be described as spiritual without being preachy, it would be The Bells of Fraggle Rock. This episode of Jim Henson's beloved show dealt with faith, doubt, and the meaning of tradition, themes rarely explored in children's television at the time. As the Fraggles prepared to celebrate the Festival of the Bells, Gobo set out to prove that the ceremony was meaningless, only to rediscover its importance in his own way. The writing was poetic, the puppetry otherworldly, and the atmosphere unlike anything else on television. It was gentle, slow, and contemplative, reminding viewers that belief is not about proof, it is about hope. The haunting bell sounds and soft choral music gave it a tone closer to a fable than a cartoon. It was also deeply emotional for older viewers who saw reflections of their own doubts and rediscoveries in Gobo's journey. Jim Henson had a gift for creating joy out of sincerity, and this special was one of his finest examples. Watching it today feels like lighting a candle in a dark room, quiet, beautiful, and deeply human. Mama's Family took its roots from a sketch on The Carol Burnett Show and turned it into a full-blown sitcom about a sharp-tongued matriarch named Thelma Harper. Played by Vicki Lawrence, Mama was a walking storm of sarcasm, stubbornness, and slapstick humor. Living in small-town America with her eccentric relatives, she dealt with everyday chaos in ways only she could, by yelling, fussing, and ultimately loving her family through it all. The show combined quick one-liners, outrageous misunderstandings, and over-the-top Southern charm. Every argument felt like a comedy showdown, with Mama always getting the last word. Despite its wild tone, Mama's Family had a genuine heart. Beneath the snark and shouting was a relatable story about families sticking together through thick and thin. It captured small-town life in all its messy glory, funny, loud, and endlessly entertaining. Vicki Lawrence's performance anchored it all, giving Mama just enough warmth to balance the sass. Decades later, her blue dress and gray wig remain iconic symbols of 1980s sitcom gold. You were not just writing letters in the 1980s. You were sending sensory experiences. Perfumed stationery sets were the peak of pen pal drama. Heart-shaped pages with lace borders, sparkly envelopes, and enough floral scent to knock out a small room. There were sets that smelled like roses, vanilla, ocean breeze, or something suspiciously like bubble gum and detergent. You would open a note from your best friend and nearly pass out from the aroma. It was like the page had bathed in perfume and never toweled off. They were beautiful, romantic, and borderline unreadable. The ink would smudge from the coated paper. The scent would linger for days. And if you tried mailing one of these in the heat, good luck. The envelope might as well have been dipped in cologne. Still, it was all part of the charm. These notes were not meant to last forever. They were moments frozen in scent. They smelled like crushes and sleepovers and secrets told in cursive. But not all nostalgia smells sweet. Because the next 1980s trend? It came with a can of hairspray, a comb, and enough height to qualify as a fire hazard. Little ice cube trays were cold, clunky, and unforgettable. Before plastic trays and automatic ice makers took over, these heavy-duty aluminum trays were the standard in American freezers during the 1960s. They had a removable divider with a metal lever that cracked the cubes free with a satisfying snap. But it was not always smooth. The handle sometimes stuck, the cubes often splintered, and if your hands were wet or too warm, the metal could stick to your fingers, something you only did once. Despite the fuss, there was something almost ceremonial about making ice. You filled the tray carefully, slid it into the freezer with steady hands, and waited. Hours later, you lifted the lever, twisted the tray, and heard that sharp mechanical crack as the cubes broke loose. It was noisy, it was physical, and it was reliable. Drinks were never the same without it. Whether you were filling a glass of Tang, cooling a cola, or preparing a highball for company, those chunky, slightly imperfect cubes were part of the experience. Today's ice makers are quiet and effortless, but they lack the charm and the muscle memory of prying open one of those stubborn metal trays. For many, it is a sound and struggle that still lives in the back of the mind. Some Christmas specials shout for attention. This one whispered. Babar and Father Christmas was a quiet, beautifully drawn story about kindness and discovery. Based on Jean de Brunhoff's classic books, it followed the beloved Elephant King on a journey from his jungle kingdom to find Santa Claus. The animation was elegant and distinctly European, with hand-painted backgrounds that looked like storybook pages brought to life. It carried the grace of an old watercolor painting, with every frame breathing calm and sincerity. Even the smallest gestures, a smile, a snowfall, felt filled with emotion. The pacing was gentle, the narration soothing, and the moral simple. Generosity and belief know no borders. Unlike the flashier American specials of its time, Babar embraced calm reflection over noise and spectacle. It invited children to slow down, listen, and dream. Every scene felt wrapped in warmth, like an old bedtime story told beside a glowing tree. It also carried a message that resonated far beyond its audience, that Christmas was not about receiving, but about seeking connection. For families watching it in the 80s, it was an escape into a softer world, one filled with grace and wonder. There is something timeless about that quiet courage, and it still lingers today in the memory of those who watched it once upon a December. Mr. Belvedere took the classic idea of the proper British butler and dropped him right into an all-American household, and the result was pure comedic charm. Christopher Hewitt played Lynn Belvedere, a refined, sharp-tongued butler who took a job managing the chaotic Owens family in suburban Pennsylvania. Between the sloppy kids, the grumpy father, and the constant cultural misunderstandings, Belvedere always managed to stay one step ahead, armed with cutting wit and impeccable manners. What made the show work wasn't just the humor, it was the respect underneath the sarcasm. Belvedere genuinely cared for the family, guiding them through everyday problems with wisdom disguised as dry one-liners. His diary entries at the end of each episode offered clever reflections that wrapped everything together with a touch of British class. Mr. Belvedere struck the perfect balance between sophistication and slapstick, turning cultural differences into lessons about empathy and understanding. It made audiences laugh, But it also reminded them that wisdom can come from the unlikeliest places, even a manservant with an endless supply of patience and polished comebacks. In the 1980s, sitcoms loved breaking the mold, and Who's the Boss did it beautifully. Tony Danza played Tony McKelly, a retired baseball player who took a job as a live-in housekeeper for Angela Bauer, a successful advertising executive and single mother. The setup flipped traditional gender roles, creating endless opportunities for both humor and heart. Tony's warmth and street-smart charm clashed perfectly with Angela's structured, work-obsessed personality. Their chemistry was undeniable, sparking years of will they or won't they tension that kept audiences hooked. At its core, the show was about family, the unconventional kind that proves love and respect can build stronger bonds than blood alone. Tony's daughter Samantha and Angela's son Jonathan added layers of tenderness, grounding the comedy in real emotion. The show tackled ideas about independence, equality, and changing family roles without ever losing its laughs. Who's the Boss felt like the 1980s itself, confident, evolving, and full of optimism for what modern families could look like. It wasn't just funny, it was quietly revolutionary, disguised as a feel-good sitcom. If these long-lost Christmas cartoons brought back even a flicker of the wonder you felt as a child, tell us your memories in the comments. Tap like to keep the nostalgia alive, and subscribe so you never miss another trip into the holiday magic time tried to erase.